Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor. I wanted to talk to you today about a couple of TV shows that you have got to watch. I think that we are in times that are very, very similar as XRP holders to the Industrial Revolution. And I was watching yesterday a part of one of the shows I wanted to tell you about. But in the past, I've seen the one that you're looking at right now called The Men Who Built America. But I was watching the second one, and I'll show you in a second, yesterday, and it gave me the idea to do this video for you today. But first, as long as I'm covering one, I'm going to cover both. It is very important that you see The Men Who Built America, because The Men Who Built America gives you a great snapshot into what goes on behind the scenes when there are high stakes games going on like there are in digital assets and cryptocurrencies right now. This is a digital revolution that's going on right before our eyes, and most of it's going on behind the scenes, but we're seeing a lot of it in our day-to-day news. We're not seeing probably what's really going on behind the scenes, but these shows on the History Channel really can give you a good look into the way that the people think and the things that are being done behind the scenes. And I'm going to give you an example of one of those today that I saw on one of these shows that I was watching yesterday. The Men Who Built America, I wanted to pull this up to give you a little more background. It focuses in on Cornelius Vanderbilt, John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Thomas Edison, and Henry Ford, because all of those men pretty much changed entire industries. The Industrial Revolution involved the invention, the creation of the steel industry, the oil industry, the banking industry was created and transformed, the railroad industry and electricity, and then of course the creation of cars and the system of roads and the system of roads that we have in the United States. It was a time of tremendous change, and the stakes were so high that these men had to really be genius in the moves that they made and how they made them. So this is it's a multi-part series. Whatever you have to do, go watch it, because it'll really make you understand what you're a part of right now. And what I've said in the past, which is so great about this digital revolution, is that it's the one exception in history where common men, you didn't have to be the inventor or the corporate titan or the money man to take part in the revolution. This is the first revolution where average Joe can sit here behind their computer and take an active role in this revolution. And that's why I'm so excited, and that's why you should be so excited. You stand to have your lives changed just like I do. And that's what makes this so exciting, and that's why most of you are so excited, and you should be. But back to the show. So anyway, I want you to watch The Men Who Built America. It's fascinating. It's an unbelievably good docudrama about what happened and how America was built. But they did another one called The Cars That Made America, and that's what I was watching yesterday when I got the idea for this video. And all of the players, all the names that you see on these cars even today are the same names that were involved back then. And if you didn't know, there were thousands of car companies, but the Chevrolets and the Fords and the Dodges that exist today, those were players in the game back then in the 1900s that were actually, they were doing for cars what Ripple is doing for digital assets today back then. And it's that exciting. But there was one story when they were talking about Henry Ford yesterday that really captured my attention, and I thought that the parallels to what we're seeing in digital assets today were so great that I needed to show it to you. So I looked up to make sure that they had the story exactly right. It was about the same as they had it on the History Channel. A few additions that I wanted to add to it. So I'm going to go through it real quick with you. And the gist of it, I'm going to give you kind of a summary. I'm not going to bore you to death with this, but it's pretty interesting. You've all heard of the car Dodge. Well, that company was started by the Dodge brothers. But before that, Henry Ford, the Dodge brothers were machinists. And Henry Ford had approached the Dodge brothers to come and build engines for Henry Ford, which they agreed to do. And in return, they got paid, but they also got 10% of the shares of Ford. And that happened in 1903. And then after they had worked there for a while, the Dodge brothers had decided that they were going to sue Ford because they said that he was pricing the cars too low, and they sued for a dividend because they said that he was pricing the cars too low, and that there was all kinds of money that shareholders were not getting that they could get if he was pricing the cars appropriately. Well, the Dodges, they eventually won the case, and so the court ordered Ford to issue $20 million in dividend distributions, but it didn't have to happen right then. Ford had a period of time before they were actually going to have to make that distribution. And so here's where it gets interesting, and I want you to think about the things that are going on today, and I'll remind you after I finish this. But what's interesting is at that time, so Ford got to thinking. He said, well, the company is going to have to do a $20 million, out here I've got these Dodge brothers who own 10% of my company now, and I'm fixing to have to we're going to have to do a $20 million distribution. And so I got two problems. I don't want to put all this money out and give it to these guys, and I want control of my company back. I think I want to say he had like 58% at this time. And so what he does is in 1918, he announces that he's going to resign as the president of Ford. Then in 1919, now understand the reason that Ford is doing this, he's intentionally trying to drive the Ford stock price down, even though he owns shares. So then in 1919, and he appointed his son the president, but he still knew that the stock price would go down. In 1919, Ford announces his intention to form a new car company, and it's going to compete with Ford. So imagine the guts this guy has. He's going to go off and start a new company that's going to compete with the company he created, and he does all of this to drop the stock price. So then the stock price drops, and then Ford, behind the scenes through brokers and bankers, goes and starts buying shares at the discounted price. So then, once he's bought all these shares at the discounted price, in July of 1919, the court ordered dividends were to be distributed. Well, guess who received $12 million of the $20 million in distribution because they're now a majority stock owner? Ford. The Dodge brothers, I believe, ended up with a couple of million. But now Ford had achieved, first of all, he got most of the money that was a lawsuit against his company. He received most of the money himself. Then he's back to being a majority shareholder in the company, and he's got the Dodges out of his way. I tell you that story because these are the kind of things that are being done right now in the high stakes game that Ripple is involved in. What this immediately reminds me of, and I'm not saying Ripple is doing it, not by any means, but I'm saying that there are major players in the game, and these major players are playing these kind of games that Ford would play because these are big, heavy hitters. The George Soroses of the world. These are the kind of games that these guys are going to play. Now, ultimately, XRP is going to go exactly where your gut and my gut tells us it's going to go because we've done the research. We know exactly what we're dealing with. And I'm going to show you just more and more evidence as we go along. But I'll show you a little before this video, some new evidence. of some new facts of what's coming and why. But I wanted to really let this sink in about Henry Ford, because the people in these kind of positions of power that are playing these high stakes games, this is how they think. You and I, a lot of us that are average people, we've never been put in a position where we have to think this way, or maybe we never could or would think this way. But this is part of the reason that those of you that get all nervous every time the price of XRP is going down, this is just part of the game. This is how it's played. This is part of what you have to go through to get to places in life that you couldn't imagine that you could have gotten. You have to man up. And these are the times that you man up, because these are just the games that are going to be played. They want to get all the weaklings out. So anyway, this stuff we've been seeing about all this security business and all, it's not a coincidence. It is not. And let this sink in. All these lawsuits about security and all this. Here's what's not a coincidence, and this is the final thing I'll say about this. These Ford, I'll call them Ford tactics. It is everything in my gut tells me that in an honest, above board world, you wouldn't be sitting in this twilight zone area where the SEC knows that the world's waiting on them to make a decision, but they won't make a decision. You wouldn't be sitting in this no man's land. This is by design. This is by someone who wants this to be vague. They want it to be vague for a reason. And some of us may not understand the reason, but these are strings that are being pulled, and they're being pulled intentionally. And so, but this is the way the world works. And the people who get on in the world are the people who man up, and they're able to accept risks like this. I grew up with a father who was in the home building business. This guy had to lay his head on his pillow owing a lot of money every day of his life. And a lot of people say they would like to have a lot of money, but they're not willing to put their head on the pillow and accept certain risks that someone like that's in a leveraged business is willing to accept. Everybody would say, I'd love to have what Henry Ford had or Vanderbilt had, but are they willing, or were they willing to go to bed at night with what would give most of us an ulcer? Because that's what this is. We're playing big boy games now. I plan on getting big boy rich off of XRP. And so this stuff doesn't bother me. I understand it. And maybe I wouldn't have understood it 10 years ago, but I understand it now. So I'm going to move on. And I want to show you further how big of a big boy game we're playing. This was from, and I don't know if I've ever told you to follow him before, but you've got to. Dr. T, and keep your politics out of this, but his name is @XRP Trump. I'm not getting into all that. But this guy provides really good information, and so you need to follow him. He's one of the top 3 guys. C3 Nick, Bank XRP, and XRP Trump are 3 of the best Twitter feeds, guys that get information that I would recommend with regard to XRP and Ripple. But yesterday, XRP Trump put this out, and it says, so now in our pipeline, this is Ashish Birla. Okay, something I want to mention about this Birla guy before I go further into this. Are you noticing? One thing that I'm noticing about the Ripple executives and the people at Ripple right now, I'm noticing a lot of swagger right now. I'm noticing guys that have something in their step and the way they talk. These are guys that are more confident than they were even a few months ago. And I want you to go to XRP Trump's thing, and I want you to watch this video, because this guy is just this side of being cocky. And that's a good sign for us, because these guys are not confident like this for no reason. They know where we're at. They know that we're fixing to take over the world. So it says, so now in our pipeline, we have probably 50% of the market in India, either integrated onto Ripple or in the deal, in the pipeline to be signed. And guess what? We're going to take that back to Wells Fargo and say that there's not a better way to send into India than Ripple. So just imagine, you see Ripple you don't drop names like Wells Fargo like that in those kind of terms unless you're starting to get a tremendous amount of leverage and the confidence that comes with that leverage. Because what he's saying right there is, hey, I can go to Wells Fargo and it's not my problem anymore, it's their problem. They're the ones that have the stress on them because they know what's coming now. That's what he's telling them right there. Well, let's look just so you understand how big this India thing is. So now in our pipeline, probably 50% of the market in India. Well, look at this. The India market for remittances is the largest in the world. India was the largest remittance receiving country in the world, with migrant workers from the country sending home 69 billion in US dollars in 2017, according to a report which said remittances to the Asia Pacific region amounted to 256 billion last year. So this is huge, huge, huge. So I'm going to finish off this video by telling you two things. And those two things are, do not be surprised if when you hear those names of Vanderbilt, Edison, Rockefeller, JP Morgan, those kind of names, Henry Ford, don't be surprised, because here's what I believe is going to happen. I believe that you'll see Chris Larson's name in that same type of conversation one day, and I think you'll see Brad Garlinghouse's name in that same conversation as well. When the history books are written, that's how big what you are a part of is. And so don't forget that, and don't forget to put your big boy pants on, and don't get freaked out by all these little things that are happening. What matters is what your overall gut is telling you from all of the research that you've done and all the things, piece all the things you've heard together and what you've read and the deals that are signed and the things that are happening right now and the partners who have said they're going to use XRP. This is what matters, not what people who are intentionally trying to manipulate you and the market and what your thoughts are. Pay attention to the big picture and what your common sense guided by your research is telling you. I am the digital asset investor. I am not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Now listen, everybody, I want to tell you something else. Yesterday, one more thing. Yesterday, if I can pull it up. Okay, yesterday, Ledger came out with their new software. Let me see if I can find it on here. They came out with, well, products. See if it's in the products section. They came out with their new software yesterday, and I'm drawing a blank on what it. Okay, maybe it's in the apps section. Drawing a blank on, here it is. It's called Ledger Live. Now, before, when you bought a Ledger Nano S, before they had piecemeal software. They'd have one software for XRP. They had some apps that you would have through Google Chrome. But now what they've done is they've put it all on one app, is my understanding of this. But now it's also cooler because when you plug in your ledger, it tells you what the market value of your assets are, and they are really getting a much better platform together now. So if you haven't ever heard me say this before, I say it at the end of every video for your protection. The Ledger Nano S, and they also have other products, but it's a hard wallet. It's the safest way to store your digital assets. You get to take them offline and keep them in cold storage with a Ledger Nano S. Okay? In every video I do, there's a link directly to Ledger, which is the only safe way to do it. It'll take you straight to Ledger, the company, and you can get a Ledger Nano S, and then you can download this software. And they're really good about how they show you exactly how to set it up. So go and do this. Get your Ledger Nano S, and you trust me. The first night I had my digital assets on a Ledger, I slept a lot better, and I have ever since. I don't worry about it anymore. But that was always a concern of mine. Is today the day that my digital assets are stolen off of an exchange? Also, I need you guys to subscribe, pass my videos around. I need a bunch of likes. I'm trying to grow my channel. And the last thing is, if you want any cryptocurrency gear, I just was sent an XRP T-shirt from the guys that sell the cryptocurrency merchandise for me. You can go in my description also on that, and I have a 20% discount code where you can get 20% off at that if you want to. And there's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. Well, thank you guys for listening, and I hope this video helps you.